Well, it is 6:31, so I'm going to say hello to everyone. Instead of our normal monthly seminar series, we know we don't usually have one in December because there's so much time spent with all kinds of other activities. Instead, tonight we're doing on a slightly different date. We are doing a panel discussion of native plant ordinances for Tennessee. And I apologize ahead of time for my voice. I'm not sick. It's a sinus thing and it affects me when I do much talking. So I'm hoping it's going to get better, but I can't promise. With us tonight is Deborah Rosenthal, and the two of us will be sharing with you our adventures in getting native plant ordinances introduced or modified, getting an ordinance modified or introduced that includes native plants and not invasives in our yards and in our properties. So, and in our communities for certain. We are definitely going to be asking you questions. See, I'll give y'all a few minutes. How many of you live in rural areas? Can you have a raise your hand down at the bottom of your screen? It says raise hand. How many of you live in a rural area? Anyone?
Uh-oh.
Okay, one.
It.
Okay, how many of you live in a suburban area? One, two, three, four. Let's see, four. How many live in an urban area? Hands up. Let's take the other hands down. Okay. Urban area. And I have one, two, three. Okay, four. So we're mostly suburban and urban with a few rural. Thank you. You can all put your hands down now. Okay, this is going to be an adventure. This is something I haven't done before. So, Deborah, did you want to start off or would you rather I did?
I can go ahead and start off, and I'm not seeing all the participants for whatever reason. Can you see whether Amanda has joined yet or not?
I do not see her.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm happy to go ahead and kick it off.
Okay. Actually, I'll say that Deborah really did kick off this whole thing for me. Back in January, this past January, I learned that Deborah had managed to get an ordinance requiring 50% native plants and no invasives where she lives in Erin, Tennessee, a little town called White Bluff. And at that point, up until that point, I'd been thinking about trying to tackle the whole state and was meeting a lot of, oh, good luck kind of comments and attitudes. So I thought that's probably going to be out of the question. But if Deborah could do it, how'd she do it? Can I do it? So Deborah started this whole thing for me. So I'm going to let her start now for the tonight.
Great. Thank you for that, Karen. I'm really excited to be talking to you all tonight because we have some real momentum with 3 jurisdictions that have now passed an ordinance requiring most new developments to use 50% native plants and prohibiting the planting of commercially available invasive species. Fingers crossed, I have a meeting on Monday and hope to bring a 4th jurisdiction on board relatively soon. But what's so important about having 3 jurisdictions who have already done this is that we're now over the hurdle of anybody having to be the first jurisdiction. An ordinance requiring the planting of native plants, that is new and novel legislation, not only in the state of Tennessee, but frankly, in the entire country. When I first started looking at this and looking for examples of ordinances in other places, I could barely find any. Mostly I found them in the Northeast. It's funny because at the beginning of this call, I learned from Margaret that apparently Bloomington, Indiana has such an ordinance, but that's not one that I had come across. But it's still new and novel legislation. And the fact that Tennessee has passed, well, jurisdictions in Tennessee have passed such an ordinance, that's pretty remarkable. And the fact that the town of White Bluff, which is a rural town about 40 miles west of Nashville, was the first one to do it. They are not known for going out on a limb. That is really a boon to getting this thing going. So my goal tonight is to activate as many of you as possible to try something like this. And I think that it may seem daunting, but you might be surprised as to how easily it might happen. And I think when Karen shares her experience, that she's probably surprised at how open to the idea that people were in her town when she broached it with them. And I do also want to say that the idea of getting the state of Tennessee to pass something, that is virtually impossible. But if we can get a number of small jurisdictions and keep rolling those up until we get into larger jurisdictions, that is really how this is going to happen. So I want to start with, what do we mean when we say a native plant ordinance? I'm going to give you the 50,000 foot view. Amanda Harrington, who is supposed to be on the call, and I don't know if she's shown up yet, and I don't see a text message from her. She is the planner who worked with me on the White Bluff and Dixon County ordinance. And she is a professional planner. She's a degree in this stuff, and she can talk about more of the sort of technical side of it. But if something's happened and she can't join us, I can probably fill in some of that with the caveat that I am not a planner a little bit later. But at that 50,000 foot view, what I mean when I say native plant ordinance is the requirement that some percentage of plants in a town's development ordinances that require a landscape plan include native plants. It doesn't have to be 50%. What Margaret was saying earlier is that the Bloomington ordinance requires 100%. And I originally had proposed to Amanda that we use 100%. And I vacillated, 75%, 100%, but I initially went 100%. And Amanda came back to me and said that she recommended 50% because she thought that was more sellable. And she was absolutely right, especially given that this is so new. But even from a practical standpoint, in hindsight, I think that 50% is a better number, because one of the things that a lot of landscape ordinances require is evergreen screening. And that's essentially to screen unsightly equipment, commercial development, to screen in between neighbors. Although typically these ordinances don't apply to single family homes, but like in a planned unit development, other screening requirements. And as we all know, the variety of evergreen screening trees and shrubs in native plants is not as robust as we would like. So the fact that a developer has a 50% component that can be non-native, and it can't be invasive, I think is important. And I think that at this point, with the amount of native plants available in the commercial trade, 50% just feels more doable. And I think 100% could be doomed to fail, but that's a separate conversation we could have. The ordinances that have been passed also include a prohibition on planting commercially available invasive species. That doesn't necessarily have to be part of an ordinance requiring native plants. And in fact, that was not something that I originally intended when I first broached this idea of a native plant ordinance. It was only as I worked on it that I got the idea. So frankly, I think of the commercial invasive species prohibition is really icing on the cake, but I encourage people to try to get it, because I do a lot of restoration on my property, and it galls me that I spend hours and money eradicating invasive species only to have somebody go and buy burning bush at the nursery and plant it, and then it ends up back in my restoration areas. Another point, when I say native plant ordinance, I'm not talking about the whole landscape ordinance for a jurisdiction. I am simply talking about the one requirement that a portion of the plants be native. The form of the ordinance is going to depend on whatever jurisdiction ordinances are there. So, for example, when I first, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, when I first started on this, I was trying to amend White Bluff and Dixon County's existing ordinances. They ended up revamping their entire landscape ordinance, threw the whole thing out because it needed to be redone, put in a new one, and then this native plant requirement was just a portion of it. So there is no particular form that it needs to take. It's simply the requirement, and then there are a couple of findings that have to be in there that support why native plants are important. So how did I do this? In many respects, it was very simple. I just asked. Now, as simple as I made that sound, it was a little more complicated because the journey that I took leading up to being able to just ask was about a 4-year journey. But I don't think that I really need to go into depth as to what my journey was like, because I don't think that that's what I had to do was not necessary, because one, the consciousness about native plants were much farther down the road. We already have 3 native plant ordinances we can draft off of. So it's not this entire education from scratch that we need to be doing. So the first step is to determine what elected or appointed officials you know in your jurisdiction and find native plant allies in them. And you would be surprised where you might find them. Now, rural areas are probably easier than certainly urban areas and maybe suburban areas, but they're also a little bit harder. And I don't know that it's just because they're rural that they're easier. It's more a question of size. So maybe some of your suburban areas will fall into the easier category as well. So the reason why I say it's easier is because in rural areas, your officials are much more accessible. You are likely 1 degree of separation from somebody on a planning commission or a county commission or somebody who works for the government. The meetings are easy to attend. Everybody knows everybody. So you can start having the conversations more easily. The reason why I say rural areas are also a little bit tougher is because they do tend to be more conservative. And I think about this kind of legislation as being really more progressive legislation, not the sort of thing that sort of rural areas, want to get out in front of. But here's another benefit for rural areas. In the rural areas, there is still a lot of nostalgia for the way things were. So when you talk to people about, they're not going to know the science names for the plants. If you say Rudbeckia hirta or any scientific name, they're not going to know, but they know black-eyed Susan. They know purple coneflower. And when you tell them, yes, native plants are all these things that you used to see, when you used to walk to school, that's something that resonates with them. So what happened in my particular case, and I think that there are some lessons to learn from it, is I had begun attending local town council and commission meetings because I was concerned about development that was happening in my area. We're 40 miles west of Nashville, and most of the rural areas north, south, and east of Nashville have been steamrolled by development. And about 4 years ago, it started to head my direction, and I got very alarmed about that. So I was going to these meetings where development proposals were being talked about, and I just began meeting people and talking to everybody I could about native plants. And now here I'm going to digress for just a moment about my personal journey. I had also, about the time that I started attending these meetings, I had just learned about native plants and about prairies. And I decided to convert a 4-acre non-native fescue pasture to a pollinator prairie. And it fronts on a highway in a very visible place. And so when I would go to these meetings, I'd find a way to talk about native plants, and I'd say, yeah, have you ever, driven up Highway 47 and seen that field of wildflowers? That's me. So that was really my entry into how to talk to people about this. That's not going to be yours because you're unlikely to go out and do that, but you will have whatever your own opening is. And I think for Karen, her opening and her credibility was, I'm president of the Tennessee Native Plant Society. I'm interested in native plants, and you're off to the races. So an example of one of the conversations I had is I was at a meeting, my county, Dixon County, we had a series of meetings to evaluate the the growth plan for the county. And I was preaching to somebody at this meeting, like I did everybody. I was like the crazy pollinator later, talking to everybody about this stuff. And the person I was talking to told me that the director of public works, I think that's his title essentially, for the town of White Bluff was a prairie guy. He loved the Southeastern Grasslands Institute. He knew Mike Berkeley, he had been to Grow Wild. And he happened to be at the meeting I was at, and I immediately made a beeline for him and said, oh my gosh, I hear you're into native plants. And that was my first key ally. And so ultimately, once I formulated the idea for the native plant ordinance, which happened after this meeting, I went back to him and I said, what would you think of this? Would you guys be open to this? And he said, absolutely. So I offered to draft the ordinance. And now I'm going to take a sip of water. Karen, can you check if Amanda is on yet?
I don't see her. There's one iPhone without a name.
Amanda, if you happen to be on, let us hear your voice. Okay. So since Amanda's not on, I'm gonna pick up maybe a little bit of the stuff that she might talk about. Oh, okay. This is just Jennifer. You're not just Jennifer. You're Jennifer. But thanks for letting us know. So anyway, I offered to take a shot at drafting the ordinance, because one of the things in the rural areas, for those of you in rural areas, the rural areas typically do not have on-staff planners. They usually have contract planners. And Amanda was the contract planner for 5 areas around me. So the town of White Bluff, Dixon County, Burns, another area right near me. So at the time, I didn't actually know this, and I knew that they didn't really have the wherewithal to take the labor and ore, which is why I offered to do that. And my process was, I started looking for exemplars wherever I could find them. I couldn't find very many of them. I talked to Roseanne Plant, who's a wild ones lawyer who does this sort of stuff. She had drafted a model ordinance, so I talked with her. I got her model ordinance. But I looked at the town of White Bluff's landscape ordinance, and I started figuring out, how do I modify the existing ordinance to require as little as possible. Just a couple sentences here and there. It shouldn't be that difficult. So I was starting to do that, but then I went to another meeting in the town of Burns, and I ambushed a developer there, because another one of my strategies was to approach developers and ask them if they would voluntarily incorporate native plants into their development plans. And they want to be agreeable. They want community support for their development. So if somebody comes to them and says, will you do this? And I'm going to speak on behalf of, on your project, you'd be surprised what they're willing to do. And it was at that ambush that I'm pretty sure Amanda was actually there. And after the conversation with the developer, I continued to talk with Amanda, and I floated this idea of a native plant ordinance to her. And it turns out she loved it as well. So I told her that I was working on it for the town of White Bluff. And rather than just say, oh, great, you're a planner, you think it's a good idea, you go ahead and do it, I said, let me just keep doing this. And I continue to work on it. So to make a long story short, I took it as far as I could, because I really needed Amanda's input, or the input from somebody at the town, because there were just so many ways to skin the cat. Gosh, I hate that expression. I'm not sure why I used it, but there's so many ways to go about doing it. And so I contacted Amanda, and I basically turned everything that I had done over to her to seek her input as to how to take it to the next step. And somehow, and somewhere in that process of me working on this, I had formulated the idea of the ban on invasive species. And I don't know where I saw it, but I must have seen it somewhere. And I pitched that to Amanda, and luckily she loved the idea. She thought it was a great idea. So great, we were in, and she was going to go ahead and support that. So like I said, I took it as far as I could, and she took the ball and she started to run with it. And we then had a series of conversations about the definition of native plants, certain other considerations. I saw a first draft. She had taken a first approach. And she said that she wanted to include in the ordinance a list of all of the approved native plants and all of the prohibited invasive species, because she didn't want to leave it to somebody to say, well, them to figure it out. And although I originally was a little bit daunted at that prospect, I volunteered to create the appendix, the two appendices, because I knew we know more about native plants than they're going to know about native plants. They love the idea, but to actually put together the list of what's commercially available and what's feasible, that wasn't going to happen unless I did that. And it's a separate conversation we can have as to how I did it, but it is a list of 700 trees, shrubs, perennials divided into ground covers and I think vines. I will say this one caveat. It is 700 commercially available, but not all commercially available in the size that many landscape ordinances require. A lot of landscape ordinances require you plant like 15 gallons or 5 gallons or whatever it is. And some of these species aren't available. The reason the list is over-inclusive is because I actually didn't think about it. I didn't realize it at the time. But I'm glad that it is over-inclusive, because as the landscape industry is upscaling, and they are doing it, this is now like the issue today. Some of these species are going to become commercially available, and the list can evolve. So again, a long conversation as to how I came up with that list, if anybody's interested. And then the list of prohibited invasive species. I talked with Margie Hunter. I got advice from the Tennessee Invasive Plant Council. There are all species on the Invasive Plant Council's 2 lists of invasive species, but I weeded out the ones that are not commercially available because it was just going to confuse people. So it's just what you could go to the nursery and buy. So once that was done, ultimately the ordinance that the town of White Bluff considered had changed from the one that Amanda originally proposed. They ended up revamping their entire landscape ordinance, which they really did need to do. And so from my standpoint, it was a much better ordinance just because the other things were much better, but now it included those components. So I want to summarize some of the takeaways and the steps. First, figure out who you know who's involved in local government, and then find your native plant allies. Become a native plant ambassador and talk to people about them. I have even given Nature's Best Hope and the Insect Crisis by Dr. Oliver Millman to several of the officials that I've talked with and met with, in talking to them about why this is so important. They may never ever read it, but they've got it. So they know it's just not me saying, yeah, this stuff is really important. And then just ask. You would be surprised at what people might say. Find out who's in charge. Tout what has already been done. You can say, White Bluff did it. The county of Dixon did it. If they could do it, how can we not do it? And again, ride on that momentum. And then if you get to the point where it is going to go to the planning commission or the elected officials, be prepared to bring public support if you need it. I had pretty good intel that the ordinances were being favorably viewed, and I didn't have to rally any troops. I actually went and spoke on behalf of the ordinances. I have had to rally and fill a room on other ordinances that I've worked on that were a lot more controversial, but these just didn't seem to be controversial And so I didn't have to do that. And I think with that, that's kind of my overview. We still have no Amanda, right?
I don't see her.
Okay. Karen, you want to take some questions? You want to give your bit? How do you want to proceed?
I think I'd like to do I've got a very, very short 5 slides, but it includes the nitty gritty about how I did it. And it's very similar to Deborah's, and it will be very similar to what you're going to do. There will be differences, but the whole general idea is the same. So let me. Okay. Let's do slideshow from the beginning. All right, hopefully you can see this. This is Thompson Station is a very, very rural area that is rapidly becoming suburban. Um, we have a trail camera behind the house. I'm in the middle of a 1,000 home subdivision that is all less than 12 years old. The entire, and that was with construction being halted for about 4 years in there. So it's rapidly growing. The town offices were the caboose of a train caboose. That was it until earlier this last year when they moved the town offices all together into what had been a barn, but is now in a subdivision on the front part of the subdivision. You can see all this expansive grass. That's because there was a big mansion there. And you know how mansions have all kinds of nice grass. So my goal now that I've got the ordinance passed is I would like to get them to put in sample gardens, shade garden, rainwater garden, shade garden, woods garden, put in several different showcase areas so people can see that there are plenty of plants available for all kinds of situations. So we go forward. All right. When I heard what Amanda was doing or had done, I thought, well, I wonder what's going on here in Thompson Station. So I checked on the website. Everybody has a website now. All the towns, I think in Tennessee, all of them, even the smallest, have some kind of website presence. So if look at your town website, get the information on, find out whether there's a planning and zoning commission, a land development commission. What is the name of it in your town? And the name will vary. In my case, it was planning and zoning for Thompson Station. So I went to the planning and zoning and on the website, and lo and behold, they were in the process of redoing the land development ordinance. They were in the midst of the process. They had already started it. So I looked at the dates on it. The one that they were revising had been written in 2015 and revised in 2021, but they were revising the entire ordinance from beginning to end. So I tried to figure out who had created the document and learn their name. You need to know their name. Who did it? In my case, the current town planner was Michael Wood. And he turned out to be a wonderful ally. When I learned this, I contacted Micah and asked, "Oh, how long is this plan, this revision of the development ordinance? Is it, are you done? Or are you in the final stages where you just get approvals, or are we early enough to make some changes?" He said, "What changes do you have in mind?" I didn't realize it, but he was a member of TNPS. So it was fabulous. It wasn't until later this year that I figured that out. Anyway, Micah was very agreeable to hearing my suggestions. He said, "Why don't you go through and let me know what you want to revise in the document and how you would like it revised." So I took the time and I went through this document. It was 250 pages probably or more. And I went through, I first of all looked for sections that I knew would be important. So I haven't figured out where my arrows are here. Okay. So I came to one of the town council meetings and watched them in action. It just so happens the current mayor of the town is one street over from me. He's literally around the corner. And I have talked and met with him and talked with him before. So that was fun. Then I went in and I met Micah. Found him to be really interested in native plants and all things native. He introduced me to the town attorney, which is the same attorney that Deborah was dealing with. And lo and behold, one of the town councilmen had already introduced changes in the ordinance that dealing with the night sky, making sure we had a dark sky in new developments so that you can, the birds don't get confused, the insects don't get confused. So right away I knew I was dealing with a favorable group of people, and I had allies in Micah, the town attorney, and at least one of the councilmen, and maybe the mayor. So I started going through the document, all 250 pages, and I found 4 of the articles needed some upgrading because they were already talking about plants. And I wanted to be sure that anywhere they talked about plants, adding plants, that they added native plants. So I found there were definitions that were really odd to me as a native plant person. So I marked definitions as an area that I really needed to look over carefully. I found resource management was important, lot standards. And then the third one was, I'm sorry. Hang on here. I need to go forward. All right. The fourth one was landscaping standards. That's the meat right there. Landscaping standards. And I knew that was going to be really critical part. So I went ahead and I drafted the new and improved version of sections of those articles, not the whole thing. Not the whole thing. I liked Deborah's idea of 50% native plants because that gets our foot in the door. It is likely not to cause opposition from the developers, and getting in that prohibiting those native species, prohibiting the invasive species, for me was important. After looking around my subdivision, this new subdivision is so loaded with burning bushes and other invasive species. It's horrible. So what I rewrote is what you see here in green. Since I knew this fourth article was the meat of it, that was where I spent my time. And it's all required landscaping materials shall be composed of at least 50% native plants. And I got to thinking, what is 50%? 50% by volume, by weight, by size, by number? We have to give them something, a solid anchor, a solid target. So calculation shall be based on the quantity of plants. So if you are putting in 25 new plants per home in a subdivision, then 50% of them, 13 of them need to be native plants, and none of them can be invasive species. The use of invasive plant species, in this case, the Land Development Manual is a companion to the Land Development Ordinance. The ordinance has to be approved by the Planning Commission and the mayor and alderman. The development manual is more hands-on, nitty-gritty, and does not have to have that kind of approval, but it needs to match the ordinance. So I took a look at that afterwards too. Then I found the document section that lists definitions. And I came up with a few revisions because some of them were absolutely horrific in what they described. Endangered, threatens flora. This is something that a term that's actually used in ordinance, and I wanted it to be specific. So plant species that are in danger of extinction throughout all or part of their range or are likely to become endangered in the near future are called native, are ones that are in danger of extinction. The Tennessee Natural Heritage Program, the Rare Plant List, is a comprehensive listing of endangered and threatened species in Tennessee, and it can be used as a reference for your ordinance as well as for mine. And you don't have to worry about updating it because Tennessee Natural Heritage Program keeps it updated. So this way you can keep the ordinance won't need to be changed periodically to include a different list. In this case, it's going to roll over. Invasive plant species are introduced or exotic plant species that are not native to Tennessee and may be invasive or possess the characteristics to become invasives. So they can be on the watch list and cause damage to native plant communities. This includes both established and emerging threats, as indicated by the Tennessee Invasive Plant Council. Again, I didn't have to list everything like Deborah went through and did. All I had to do was reference the Tennessee Invasive Plant Council, and they keep their lists up to date. So by including them, I kind of bulletproofed the ordinance against future changes on a regular basis. Native plant species, plants that occur naturally in an area where they evolved without human introduction or manipulation, because they talk in there in the ordinance about native plant species specifically. I wanted it to be clear what we're talking about. Natural vegetation. We could have thrown that out, but instead I went ahead and used it as a way to not have to go through the entire ordinance to try and find that. But went ahead and improved the definition to being plants, grasses, shrubs, or trees native to Middle Tennessee, because that's where Thompson Station is. So natural vegetation needs to be vegetation that is found in this area, not in the Smoky Mountains and not over on the Mississippi River. that needs to be something that belongs here. And I did not include the definition in here, but I gave it's somewhere else. I have it that I passed it along to Micah, and I think we put it in the land development manual. We have an online atlas, the Tennessee Kentucky Plant Atlas. And you can look in there and find out what is local to your county. You can screen the plants according to county level. And in some cases, you can probably do towns, but I'm not sure of that. But that's constantly being updated. And that is another good reference. They also indicate in that reference what plants are native to Tennessee and which ones are not. Okay. So what is this process? What I did was discuss with Micah the changes that I was submitting. And I gave them to Micah, the town planner. And then after he reviewed it and made some small changes, because he knows the whole document, and as it turned out, they obliterated some sections and recombined them into different name sections. So numbering changed and things of that type. Location in the document changed. So he worked on that part, along with a lot of other submissions by other people who wanted to see changes. And then when it was getting ready to go to the Planning Commission for approval, 3 days before the Planning Commission was to meet, I sent an email to every one of the members of the Planning Commission asking for the specific changes as they were now formulated in the document and telling them why. And then they approved it with their one vote. And then it was sent to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And 3 days before they voted on it, I again sent an email message to every member of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, outlining the changes, what I was asking for, and why I wanted them in the document. So how long does it take? Well, for me, it was pretty short. I didn't start on this until February, and it was approved and took effect July 1. It is now a done deal in Thompson Station. I'm so tickled. Deborah's took longer. I'm hoping that in most cases, yours, because you don't have to do quite the amount of legwork that Deborah did, that it's going to move faster because I can give you my example. Deborah has given you her example, and hopefully you'll be able to contact us and we will help you if you run into a sticking point somewhere. So how long does it take? We don't know for your area. And it could be your town, it could be your county. We started with the towns. Deborah has got it passed in her county now, and I'm working on my county. So stick with it. Don't drop it in someone else's lap and expect them to carry the ball if you're not willing to. If you want to see those changes made, stick with it. Make sure you're there at each meeting, and speak up when they give you the opportunity. I'm sure it's different in each area. We have to sign in before the meeting that we want to speak. You don't get to hear what they're going to say first. We have to tell them that we want to talk. And yet we would get 3 minutes to talk. So I had to carefully prepare what to say. But don't assume someone else is going to carry the ball for you. But do get to know your town planner, county planner, whoever's in that role. get to know them, be their friend, and don't be afraid to compromise. Do have a bottom line. I mean, 100% natives would be lovely, but I'll take 50% because now that it's in there, if we go back in 5 years and up it to 75%, and then in another 5 years up it to 100%, I mean, the document's already there. You just have to change the number, and that can slip through without developers even noticing it, hopefully. But as Deborah pointed out, there, as I'm finding out because I try and keep a list on our TNPS website of resources, and among those resources is where you can purchase native plants. People are constantly sending me now, oh, we've got a new native plant place in our town. Here's the name of them. Can you put them on the list? Sure, be happy to. I'd be glad to try and shoot something towards them. So, without further ado, I'm going to just go back to my screen here. Oops.
So Karen,
Yes.
I see a couple of questions in the chat that I can answer, and I have a couple of comments that I want to make on some of the things that you mentioned.
Okay.
So can we do that, or you want to proceed in a different way?
No, please proceed. I'm ready for that.
Okay. One thing I want to mention is that Karen really lucked out. Michael Wood is not just a great guy. He is renowned as a very forward-thinking planner. I believe Thompson Station is also a Xerces Society B city. So not to diminish what Karen did, because it was a yeoman's job, but it was a very, very, those are the kinds of towns we want to target, where they're super friendly to that. I do want to mention that in the rural areas and some of the suburban areas that are less sophisticated, and this ties into one of the questions in the chat about enforcement, are there people who are knowledgeable to enforce this? By just having a definition of native plants and leaving it to the staff to determine is it native or not native, as opposed to having an appendix with the approved native plants, you're asking the town planners and the staff and the developers to do an awful lot of work. Although I bristled at having to develop this appendix, sorry, I think appendices because there are two. I do think that there is significant benefit to having an appendix with a list, and I'm going to get into another question on the chat. And the appendices for the ordinances I worked on, there's a provisions that says they can be updated every couple of years, and it can be done administratively, which means it doesn't have to be approved by the town council. And one of the questions in the chat was whether they're all straight species or cultivars. I don't know that Karen's ordinances specifies, but when I put together the list, I included all cultivars. There are just not enough things available unless you include the cultivars. At some point, we may get to a point where straight species, but in these landscape settings, you want the plants that are going to work in those settings. So I used as one of my sources when I was creating my list, I started with a list from Grow Wild. And if it was available on Grow Wild's list and native to Tennessee, because Grow Wild has things that are not native to Tennessee, then I included it. I even included hybrids, but I went and checked to make sure that everything on the hybrid was native to Tennessee. When I did my research initially, I spoke to people who believed that even having things native just to the southeast was fine, because again, we need this to succeed, and a broader palette can sometimes be a little bit more workable. So to answer the question again on cultivars, at least in my areas, yes, those are permissible. In terms of enforcement in the rural areas, that's a problem. But that's a problem on enforcing everything. The question is really when the town planners are issuing the permits to the developers, are they ensuring that they're meeting the requirements? And there is an easy way to do that. And the developer just basically, I believe, has to just show proof of purchase of the plants. And the plant list will say, 15 of this, 15 of that. They do the math and they'll check to see, is this plant on the appendix? Part of the problem is some of the cultivars, the names change, but is it close enough? Because again, we're not going to get perfect. We're just trying to get a step in the right direction, especially in these unsophisticated areas. Somebody else asked a question about pushback from developers. We didn't get any pushback from developers. I don't know, maybe they didn't know it was coming. But one of the things, and then I'm going to make one more comment and then we can check the chat for more questions or however you want to proceed. By having a list of 700 plants and trees and shrubs, what's the developer going to say? There are not enough choices. Now, I know that they're not all available, but they're just going to call the nursery. And I, gave a list of nurseries and they're going to say, I need something on this list. And the nurseries are going to be able to find it. So I don't think that even if there is pushback from developers, I don't think that we didn't see it. And I think it's going to be hard for them to complain. If they have to figure out what's native, that might be something that they would complain about. And the last thing I just want to say is the natural vegetation. I don't know how that factors into their landscape plan. Natural vegetation, that not in the rural counties. That reflects a way more sophisticated jurisdiction than I have. But having something that is native just to Middle Tennessee, I think you may start seeing pushback on some of that. And it'll just be interesting to see how it plays out over time in Thompson Station.
Yeah.
And that was everything I saw in chat, but there seems to be more stuff.
I see one that says, are there professionals? I think you're professionals maybe in the city's jurisdictions enforcing this with knowledge of plant species and identification.
So that was what I just answered.
That's true. You covered it.
No, not yet. But again, you can check the list of the plant species and they've got the list, they can double check it too.
Yeah. And I did not receive any pushback at all from developers. Never even heard from them.
So what supporting data was submitted to justify the amendment requiring natives? No real data was submitted. I mean, mostly, again, with everybody I spoke with, I gave them Doug Calamay's book. It's up to the planners, typically in an ordinance. And I think if this is Sandra and you're a planner, this is probably where this question is coming from. Ordinances, especially when you amend them, have to have findings to justify the change. And a finding might be something like, whereas our landscapes are becoming less native and pollinators need native plants. There's a whole bunch of these whereases. Those whereases are pretty easy to find. You can find them in exemplars. Those whereases were actually in the exemplar I got from Roseanne Plant with the wild ones. But in terms of specific data, nobody was looking for that sort of thing.
No, I didn't require anything. Nothing was required of me either. It was just accepted that everybody knew that native plants were better for the environment, and I did not need to make that case. It was already something that was accepted by the council, the planning commission, Micah, the attorney. Right. Everybody I came in touch with had no problem with it.
So somebody said, can you share that list? If you're talking about the appendices, I'm happy to share those appendices with anybody if you just want to email me. We can provide my email address and I'll email it to you. Or if it's a different list that you're talking about, go ahead and put it later in the chat.
Deborah, would you want to put your email in the chat so that they can email you if necessary?
Sure. Because of how my screen is set up, it's basically just D as in Deborah, dot Ann, A-N-N, dot Rosenthal, Rosenthal, @gmail.com. I also will put a plug in for my Facebook page, Best Hope Farm, where you can follow all of our restoration. So if you're interested in that 25 acres that I'm actively restoring to the historical ecosystems that were here, and you can learn more about it at Best Hope Farm. Okay, more questions? Karen?
Ann Kenny. You're in College Grove. Okay. So you're not far from me. Yeah, I'm working on Williamson County. Would you like to work with me?
I think we
Ann,
skipped a question.
is
Karen.
Ann still here? She should be. Let's see. Ann Kenny. Yes.
You hear me now?
Ann. I hear you now, Ann.
This is all new to me, but yes, I would love to pitch in.
Well, I would love to have some more the merrier.
Okay. That sounds good to me.
Are you a member of TNPS?
I believe I am. I think I tried to join. I think I'm a member, but I'm not sure. I might
Would
have
you
come
put your email address in then?
in
In the
my
chat then?
Yeah, I will.
And I will contact you, and I don't know how much push there will be at the county level, but if there's two of us, they'll have to do a harder push.
Absolutely. And there's all, as you well know, big stirs about everything in my end of the county, but all right, I can't do but one thing at a time, and sometimes not even one thing. Okay. A Rooney 615 at Gmail. There we go. I think that's me right there.
Oh, excuse me.
Karen, you did skip a question.
I'm sorry?
I think you skipped a question, which was there a cost benefit analysis to justify the perception of additional expense?
I did not encounter one. Did you?
I did not, and I don't think that there was a perception of additional expense. Again, now with the availability of native plants in nurseries, Bates Nursery has. I know you guys are all in different places. There's just so many more nurseries carrying them, and the prices do seem to be competitive. Somebody asked, what about requiring landscape architects to stamp plans instead of civil engineers? If you live in Chattanooga, they will claim hardship. I wish Amanda were on the phone. I can tell you we're lucky. I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade. I have no. Karen, you have any thoughts on that?
It's somebody in Public Works here. Oh, I'm sorry. It's somebody in Public Works. Micah could tell me in a second, and he was considering joining us, but he couldn't because of another meeting. But I think it's one of the people in Public Works who knows a lot about plants. How much, I don't know. But I will find out more as I make my new proposal about doing some demonstration gardens around the new town building. So that town building was just it came into being just before the ordinance. It was in use, but yeah, it's really new.
Somebody asked how it's enforced, and I think we talked about that. And then Sandra asked, subdivisions aren't always required for landscape. And that's one of the exceptions that Amanda could talk about. The ordinances typically apply to new developments that meet certain requirements, typically not single family homes, probably not subdivisions of just residential homes. Planned unit developments, more of a yes. So it's going to be up to the planners to figure out. Usually it applies to anything that requires a landscape plan, and I don't think that the subdivisions require landscape plans. So just kind of a broad brushstroke. If there's a landscape plan required, it's going to require landscaping, and 50% of that is to be native, but not everything requires a landscape plan. And getting them to plant street trees, yeah, go for it. That'd be great. And parking lot trees.
Here in Thompson Station, the ordinance is for all new development. That's both housing and business. All development, all new development is required, but it's not retroactive to current development. I wish it was. But that is, maybe we can figure something out about that going down the road. For now, I'm happy because of the quantity of new development. This will make an impact. And that would include, since it covers development, that includes the street trees for the new development in that area.
That's great, Karen. We don't have those kinds of subdivisions here, at least not yet. But depending on how they are, but that's great news. So iPhone has clarified, iPhone wants the list of nurseries providing plants. Karen, that's your domain, yes?
Well, I'm trying to keep up with it on our TNPS website. Just go to www.tnps.org and go to more resources. And there's a list on there of nurseries that sell native plants, predominantly native plants.
Hey, Karen, you've got all kinds of people willing to work on Williamson County. This is great. John Kell, I'll send you the appendices if you are the John Kell that I know. Somebody said who was number 4. John also asked.
I'm the John Kell.
Fantastic.
You know.
I thought I recognized you, but you looked awfully small in that box. You also asked who is number 4. It wasn't Knox County where Sandra is working. It's actually the city of Dixon. So I've got White Bluff, the county of Dixon, and now I'm going to hit up the city of Dixon, where they've got a lot more things going on.
Well, would you let myself or Jonathan know if you'd like to, want us to get involved, because he lives in White Bluff.
Right.
And I do have a question for both you and Karen. Do you know if there's been any advances to the city of Franklin about this type of ordinance?
I understand the city of Franklin has become a bee city.
Yes, they have.
And they are working on native plant friendly ordinance. I don't know how far along they are. The gentleman I was working with is not as hands-on as I would had hoped. So he's kind of started the ball rolling and then stepped aside because he has a nice yard full of native plants.
Oh, sounds like John Brevard.
Well, that's actually
talk with him, give him a push.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. Is they're a bee city. Talk to them about Thompson Station, which is a bee city, because it's Franklin and they're way more sophisticated than White Bluff. I believe Thompson Station has, or another ordinance I saw, they actually have requirements to remove invasive species. So push for as much as you can get in Franklin, and I'm sure they have tremendous respect for Micah. I'd even ask Karen Micah who he knows in Franklin and try to enlist him in helping you in Franklin.
Yeah, Karen, if you could pass that along to me, I'd be glad to. I've talked to John Brevard. I know he was on some kind of committee within Franklin, but that's been a couple of months ago, probably 4, and I'm not hearing if anything's happening.
No, I got a recent email, and he's the one who informed me that Franklin has become a bee city. The nice push point for White Bluff and Thompson Station being the first 2 towns in the state of Tennessee to do this is that you can say, excuse me, if White Bluff and Thompson Station can do it, surely Franklin can.
Right.
Or Knoxville, or hopefully Nashville.
Well,
By getting
I had John Brevard over.
momentum here.
We have an acre and a half of a little small meadow that we've regenerated, I guess you might say, to wildflowers and native grass. And we had John over to see that this summer. I was hoping that he would, see that that's something that it's right here in Franklin. But anyway, more to work on.
That's right. And part of the thing I like about tonight is that we're starting to pull together some alliances here. So you don't have to feel like you're doing it by yourself. So I knew I had Deborah to fall back on. Even though she wasn't in Thompson Station, White Bluff was even smaller. So I
also knew that the town attorney for White Bluff and Burns was the same as Thompson Station, and that was certainly helpful.
I wish we could meet up with some of these attorneys and town planners and learn which ones are. I wish there was a place we could figure out who's covering how many of them. I think Micah's strictly Thompson Station, and he got a promotion this summer too.
Right.
So, nice. Oh, Tim, I thought I read somewhere that one of the big national home building companies has said that it will begin or has begun to use native plants. Maybe approaching builders could be an adjunct step. So far I haven't had a problem with the builders. Most of them seem to be just comfortable being given some direction. They need to be pointed at things. Just there's so much going on right now. It's exciting times. I think this is something that's going to blossom across the state. And as we gain a little bit of momentum, one or two people at a time, one town or two at a time, I think 5 years down the road, it's going to be really easy in 5 years or less, hopefully, to go to the state of Tennessee and saying, look, we've got all these little towns and all these counties are saying this is good. Don't you think we could do it at the state level?
Although, Karen, I'm not sure. This is all under local jurisdiction. I'm not sure what ordinance the state would pass. What I'd really love the state to do is the invasive species prohibition. But because the nursery trade is so big in Tennessee, that's unlikely to happen. I mean, it is a local issue, really.
But a lot of other states have done it. The state of Maryland has done it. I think Florida has done it. I've got a list of about 5 states that have done it.
I would love to see that and you're saying there are state ordinances requiring the use of native plants in local jurisdictions.
Noted. Well, I don't think they said it they can require in local jurisdictions all the time. I'm not sure of the wording.
Okay.
But well, I will look it up for you.
I would love to know what that is because
can do.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so Mary Kondo, yes, you can join us too. Mary Kondo and Kenny, glad to have both of you on board. We're gonna have a party. Because this will get easier as we move along, because we've had history, we've learned what works, we've learned to look for what terms we might want to see adjusted, and what sections of these ordinances we would like to see changed. I think it's going to get easier and easier. There's always going to be so much variability though, because each little town is different and each county is different. But they can only be so different before it's we're not on the same page even. But I think any ordinance that's dealing with planning is going to have to deal with landscaping at some point. And it's getting the terminology changed so that it reflects what is good for the native plants, what represents native plants. And like I said, there will be compromises along the way, but down the road, we can make things stiffer and stiffer as we go. Right now, it's getting our foot in the door, getting the wording into the ordinances where we can go ahead and make some changes as we go. So, a lot of new messages. Ooh. What fun we will have, says Anne. Thanks to all of you, we have many possible allies if we are lucky. Yes. All right. Are there any other comments, questions? Anybody? I want to thank all of you for coming out. And I'm just excited. I've got 2 new cohorts helping that are going to help me. Actually, Franklin may have gained some help. That's good. So, and it'll be good. I think, Mitchell, if you're listening, I think Chattanooga's prime territory because
I agree. I agree. They are. And
they're talking
looking
about a whole
to-
new slant being a worldwide first. So, no, an American first.
correct.
I saw an article the other day, and I can't remember what it is, but it's dealing with natives in some fashion.
Yeah, we
So
are attempting to become the first United States national park city.
That's it.
Yeah.
National Park City.
And
So
we will
Chattanooga's prime territory.
we will have an emphasis on a lot more green space. So this gives us a big opening to go in and talk to them about ensuring that many of those plants are natives.
Yes. And if you can encourage them to do at least 50% natives.
Yes.
Yeah,
Actually, I think you guys are primed to start including removal of invasive species if you're going to be a national park.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So not just the not planting them, but the actual removing them.
That's right. This seminar has given me a ton of ideas.
Great.
Thanks to research and people to talk to. So thank you both. This has been great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it has been good. Any other questions or comments? I know we had on earlier. Oh, Sandra, you're still here. Sandra's in Knox County or Knoxville? Are you working on Knox County or Knoxville,
both.
Sandra? Both? Okay.
Knox County at the moment. I couldn't figure out how to raise the chat. I wanted to suggest to protection so that when a development occurs, rather than just clearing the entire property, that some of the more significant trees are retained, especially the native trees. And that hasn't come up in this conversation, but rather than trying to replant just forbs and so on, why not look at trying to save some of the existing trees as well?
Sandra,
I didn't mention it because it's already in the ordinance in Thompson Station. I can send you a link to our ordinance and give you a section to look at, but it's already included in our ordinance, so I didn't need to start that. But it'll give you some ideas.
Karen, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. In rural areas that are not incorporated on property that is zoned agriculture, the Tennessee Right to Farm Act prohibits any restrictions on logging. So you have to really look at what kind of an area you're in. In the suburbs, where you have residential zoning, R1 to R3 or whatever it is, it's a different story. But ag zoning is completely different. You just cannot do anything there.
I understand. I'm talking about the other zones.
Then, as Karen said, it's in those zones. But for anybody who's in an ag zone in the rural areas.
Oh,
I had a
most of
meeting
this is
with
good.
the I had a meeting with the national representative for the Champion Tree organization. And I know that they are working on, especially the Tennessee state chapter, on identifying some of the more predominant champion trees. And a champion tree can be a champion tree just for a jurisdiction. It doesn't have to be statewide or nationwide. But in an effort to try to start preserving some of the existing green infrastructure that is already here. Just a thought. It's very difficult. You get into grading issues and so on, but it's just a thought.
Well, also, the town of White Bluff recently enacted tree preservation ordinances. I think I hooked you up with some of the people over there. So some of the jurisdictions, again, it's going to be the smaller towns that I think don't have that kind of protection. Nashville, I'm sure, has got it. But what they came up with in White Bluff, I think, was pretty good.
The problem that I'm facing in Knox County is that I have a libertarian mayor, and in our recent policy plan, which is the document that directs the zoning. So the policy plan directs what your zoning should say, sort of the foundation of everything else. And our recent adopted policy plan doesn't even mention jurisdiction. It's a very large jurisdiction. It's very rapidly growing, second fastest in the state. And there's zero interest in any environmental protection. And the developers are a political force in this area. So it's quite a challenge. And I just wanted to share that, as you said, Karen, there's all kinds of situations. And it just is going to take longer in some situations than others. But I applaud the work that's being done. It's such a good start. At least it shows there's something going on.
Well, Sandra, I would also comment that the town of White Bluff just replaced its mayor. And the best thing you can do when you've got that kind of a problem is, put somebody up as a candidate to run.
It's a 9-person body. And so we do have a few. What I'm working on right now, and I won't take much of the group's time, but real briefly, I'm reaching out to all of the environmental organizations in the city and the county, and I'm coordinating them so that when these issues do come up, and they will, that I have sort of a tsunami of voices from different points of view, all asking for environmental protection, including the native plants required in landscape ordinances. But we have a county which has a gorgeous number of trees. They clear the area, they put in the subdivisions, and they don't plant a single freaking tree. So it's sterile. And it's just discouraging. That's all I can say. It's just plain discouraging.
Yeah.
Well, I'll send you a copy of the link to the ordinance, and you can peruse all the good stuff that Thompson Station is doing with our wonderful, wonderful town planner. Micah is a force unto himself. He's a good dude.
Sandra, the last thing that I would suggest is you're talking about Knox County, and try to focus on the smaller incorporated jurisdictions. You might not get the county as a whole, but maybe you can make headway with the smaller jurisdictions in the county. So you carve out pockets.
Okay.
And that way you get your feet wet and you figure out who your allies are going to be and in the area.
Yeah, it's a matter of timing. You see, the county is working on coming up with a new set of development regulations, Unified Development Ordinance. And so now is the time to get the county to start adopting some of this stuff. If I don't do it now, it's going to be really tough because they'll say, well, we just adopted all this stuff. Let's see how it works. I'll get nothing done if I wait. But I agree with what you're saying. Oftentimes, baby steps are the best way to do it. I don't have that choice in
Unfortunately,
this situation, that's all.
yeah. Unfortunately, you're faced with a get it done now or it might not happen kind of situation. Might not happen for a while at least.
Karen, I want to make one last point and then I actually have to hop off.
Okay.
And I'm sure everybody else is ready to go too. Sandra, you're in a situation, and believe me, I faced it because in my county, we increased the minimum lot size from 1 acre to 1.5. We tried to go to 2.5. And I had to pack the room with supporters. So it's a question of, and you know, you have a planning background, you know about this stuff. But the best way to do it is fill the room. And when you've got that many people saying, we want this, and sending your planning commissioners and sending your county commissioners emails and letters, they're going to have a much harder time. And maybe you're already doing that, but that's the only way you're going to do that.
You nailed it, Deborah. That is the only way to do it. You got to just get lots of voices out there. You're absolutely correct.
Okay, I got to hop off. Karen, thank you very much for having me. Great talking to you all. I'm glad we activated some people. Tell your friends. Let's just keep this train rolling.
Yes, I like that. Let's get the train rolling. Ashley, we have gotten it rolling. Let's keep it going. So thanks everyone for coming. Don't hesitate to contact me if you need some assistance, some advice, a contact. I'm here. Use me. All right. Good night, everyone, and thank you for coming. Let's make changes here. Let's make waves.